we're live.
Hey. Superscript Book Club. We're back, guys.
With
Did
new
it.
upgraded setup.
That's true. New setup, new gear.
Each day just slightly grows.
How was the setup compared to the last minute unboxing and setup of the super sale giveaway?
Mostly the same.
Yeah.
Just a week later, or
Fair
a few
enough.
days later, I guess.
Well, good. The setup's really tabletop mics. It's the best.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
wanted tabletop mics for so long.
Now we're we're in 3D. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh my God. Do people have to?
They have to be wearing the glasses, yeah.
Or, okay. Oh God. I didn't know
It's
that.
out
I
at
didn't-
certain times.
I didn't- I
Well,
wasn't
I mean, you should
prepared
wear
for
it the
this.
whole time, and then in certain moments, it'll be like.
Also, somehow 3D
Yeah.
and only available in 4:3 aspect
Yes.
ratio.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, so we're doing
It's
like
all in
Snyder
4:3.
cut, sort of television, but not quite
we call it
television.
the Kraxis cut.
Hey, he doesn't have the exclusive on 4:3.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only
The way it
on-
was meant to be.
Trying to
It's
preserve the integrity of the artist's original vision.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's the way the book club was always meant to be seen. We're also going to do a black and white cut.
Yeah.
Deadly Class episode should have a black and white cut out in the next couple of weeks. So high contrast, low light, and it's going to look kind of going to look like Sin City a little bit.
We're
Nice.
streaming only on whatever millimeter
And-
film Tarantino shoots on.
And instead of there will be no audio from the mics, but we'll do in post production we'll do voiceovers for everyone for like
it's
what
gonna
we're
be
thinking.
a completely 80-yard
yeah.
experience. So
Yeah.
look for a
whole
unique
thing will be in
audio
slow
visual
motion.
experience.
Great.
Yeah, the whole podcast is in bullet time.
Perfect.
But
All
Nice.
of Max
Nice
Payne.
span of-
Oh yeah, I almost said Mad Max. No, that's not. Yeah.
Oh my God! Well, the black and white.
could
cut,
also do
so
black
it
and
does,
chrome,
it lines up. It all makes
yeah.
sense. It's all full circle,
It's all
folks.
comes together.
But speaking of circles and segues that don't make any sense,
There we go.
this month's book was On A
Yeah.
Sunbeam
On a
by
Sunbeam.
Tillie Walden, and I got to tell you guys, I really, really, really like this book quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, so let's make the rounds. I mean, over here, they've
First-
already declared that they
Yeah,
really
I
like
think
this
you and
book.
I are
Yeah,
pretty cemented as fans.
I would say I really like this, and I thought I was gonna like it, but it still surprised me. Like I liked it in ways I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
I could look at this book all day. That's my biggest takeaway is the artwork. It's probably my favorite thing about it, and just the use of color and lack thereof, and the approach to certain pages and stuff is really, really cool and like so visually interesting that, like I said, if this book didn't have words, I feel like she could still just as easily tell the story she's telling.
Yeah.
Yep.
What
Yeah,
about
so
all
how
you? What about this
side?
table?
Yeah, what about this table?
You want to go first?
Sure. I liked it a lot. I don't know what else to say besides that. Like, it was daunting when I picked it up.
Stream, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as
Record
like,
time.
I liked it. I really liked the art. I think Josh nailed everything I was gonna say. But when I saw it, I was like, this is too much book for
Yeah,
a book club.
it's a
but
tome.
you have so much. Like, it's just told mostly in pictures, really, and where there is dialogue. Well, I mean, there is a lot of dialogue, but it's
There are
short and
segments
it's
where,
simple. And
Yeah,
it's,
it feels like circumstantial. Like
Right.
it feels like it's there because it should be, and it feels
Right.
just like you're kind of eavesdropping on moments.
right. Yeah. Absolutely.
I also liked it. I think one of the most impressive things about it for me is magical realism is really hard to pull off in comics.
Yeah.
And you don't see a lot of people even attempt it that aren't named Gaiman.
Yeah.
Even he doesn't always get it right, and it's a huge heavy lift. That said, there were some elements of the book that I thought I wasn't exactly wild about, but I think we'll save those for conversation pieces a little later on. I think on the whole, this is probably one of my favorite books we've done for the book club.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely like a
Overall.
surprise on the level of the first installment we did.
Those who have watched all of these will know that unless it involves talking dogs, I'm just can't help but be critical of certain things. So there will be some. I don't want people to get the impression that I didn't like this book a whole lot. There's a couple of things I want to hit later on, but yeah, as far as like other things I like, just beyond commenting on just like, did anybody mention just like the color?
Incredible,
Okay.
dude.
Yeah.
Like it's that's doing like more work than even like
It's
the outstanding art on some of the pages.
Yeah.
It is like negative space stuff in ways that we're just kind of like. I mean, I don't know. You guys all said you flew through it because it does so much visual stuff. I actually had a hard time getting through it because I was just like staring at panels for so long.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say I flew through it by any means because it's definitely a lot to take in.
I would say that if you're watching the stream and you haven't read this and you plan to because of what we say, take your time. This is a book not to be rushed.
Yeah, breathe it in. It originally came out. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Christine's first impression.
Yeah, that's true. I also like the book, but I guess Elliot kind of really summed up what I was going to say. Is like I am personally, when I read, I skim things. I just like want to rip through. I want to get the plot down. I want to know what's going to happen next, and you just can't do that with this book because you really have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to who's talking. The colors force you to the muted palette almost. Like there are some loud colors for sure, but I mean they're understated in others, and you have to pay attention in a way that I don't typically, and I liked that. I did like it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. The story was heartwarming and yeah, I enjoyed it.
The color thing's interesting too because like you've got one person writing, drawing, and coloring the book, and all three are done on a level that most other books you would need one person doing each of those things.
Yeah.
Like seeing this, like if this was like an image book, it would be Kieran Gillen writing, Matthew Wilson doing colors, and like somebody else doing the artwork, and you would have like three bang up talents, and this is just one person knocking out like really creative work. Like, I mean, it's probably at least 150 pages before you see more than the palettes that the book tends to work with. And when you see it, it's the first color you see besides those main palettes, I think, is green. They go to one of the characters' like
When they go back to
family
their, like,
home.
Yeah.
And like you see a huge shock of like bright green grass, and it's so jarring in like the best possible way because everything up to that point has been blue or purple or a varying shade of this kind of like Francesco Francavilla like red, orange, yellow combination. And that's another person that brings to mind a lot is Francesco Francavilla, because he's a guy who does a similar level of work where it's one guy cranking out all three things, and it's just really, really cool.
Yeah. The one thing too with the colors, it was a lot of like warm colors for it is a love story in many ways, but it's also a sci-fi setting, so I thought that was an interesting choice. I mean, I guess a lot of the purples that are used are somewhat cooler, I suppose, but it's still a lot of oranges and reds and stuff like that, which I think makes it feel like you're at home with this book and these characters as they grow to know one another as well.
That's another thing too, is like you jump into this book and you kind of get a really good feeling for like the characters are just written really well and like developed really well, like, to where you feel like you kind of get a good sense of everybody fairly quickly. I mean, some characters take a little bit more to open up.
Yeah, I guess I felt like it took me a lot longer to figure out who the characters were.
It took me a while to connect more to them, but I do feel like it's like you kind of jump into a lived-in world.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would actually go. I mean, I would kind of argue that it's more kind of magical realism / fantasy than it is science fiction, because I feel like the fact that there is space involved, we're never really dealing with like technology or future or like,
nothing feels far-fetched.
Like it doesn't even need to be like our universe
timeline
that this takes
or
place
whatever.
in. Yeah, like everything's kind of subject to its own kind of like dream logic throughout that I really liked. I can't tell when I'm looking at you guys if that makes sense where we have
It does.
the camera set up.
Yeah, I think Nick has the screen set up to where it does look like we're looking at each other.
Because it's hard for me not to
I thought
look
of
at
this.
you guys and talk with you.
It just looks like you're talking to no one.
Got them in the right order, so it's
So by the end of the book, I did feel like I could place the identity of all of the characters. There are some moments of dialogue in probably the first like third to half of the book where it suffers from the have anybody seen like the meme where they take like the Bendis books and then swap all the dialogue bubbles around?
Yeah, you still
and it
can't
still
tell.
makes sense. And then they swap all the dialogue bubbles around again, and it's like because they're all in kind of scenes like that where there's a lot of joking and quipping or whatever. Like I kind of felt like it often did not matter who the hell anybody was because it was just like, you know, zing quip mechanism pretty early on. But I think as you find out their relationships to one another,
Sure.
that is how I felt like you learned who each of the characters were.
Yeah, it took me a little while to get my bearings in the world, I would say. And I have a question for everyone. When in the book did you realize there were no males?
Pretty early.
Yeah,
I
it was
think.
pretty early.
It took me like halfway.
I got,
Maybe that's a byproduct of us being male.
I got hung up on the grammar because L is non-binary, but I was like, there's no, as far as we know, there's no second sex at all.
Yeah, there's
Right,
So there's
right.
no
Other
binary
binary.
to exist
When
to
I
be non-binary, so you would
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
be, you know, a they.
Right.
They
When I
they mentioned girls' school at some point.
Yeah, that is
Um,
true. Yeah.
But
yeah.
every relationship we see is
Female.
females.
Yeah.
And like other than L's full name being Elliot, that's
That's
the
what
closest.
that's what threw me. That's
Yeah.
what took me the longest time
Yeah.
because I'm married to Elliot, who is male.
But yeah, I was gonna say I think I
Yeah.
thought of it when when I think the main character mentions her mother's.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely after that point.
And
for me.
then I was like, okay, maybe this is just
And
how this
something
book is
that
gonna-
like kind of was weird to me was there's a scene where Maya, who is more or less the main character of this book, is getting picked on by girls at the school, and they're like, "Oh, is this your girlfriend?" and etc. And I'm like, well, for all we know, those are the only relationships that exist. So are they saying that as making fun of her because she's gay or because Grace is weird?
right.
Or yeah, like
or
so and so's got a girl.
or it could have even just
Yeah,
been
just-
because they were 14, I think she said. So maybe it was just
So that was something that there are like two elements of that I kind of found difficult to parse as well. I so exactly where Ryan's at on that. I also thought it was interesting to me because I kind of also like presupposed like I think this might just be like an all female like everybody's a sorry like civilization. Sorry, I've been playing Mass Effect a lot. But I'm trying to think of the right way to articulate it. But I thought it was interesting that they to jump ahead, that there is kind of an allusion to like a prejudice against L for being non-binary, but like queer relationships are not. I mean, like I don't think anybody comments on them in any
No.
way.
No.
no. I think what I took from the anyone having issue with L. Do you mean like when they're at the staircase?
There's that, and then there's the part with Joe.
Okay,
Yeah,
kind of like the
placement.
fill-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Which
right,
that
so
is,
there
that's a
is
moment in general I kind of want to focus on maybe a little later because it's farther ahead in the story. But sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just trying to figure out what part you meant. But yeah, that part with Joe. Right.
That. Well, I guess we could just talk about it because we're there now. That was
So-
the only moment that like really read odd to me in the whole book. I guess
Yeah.
if I have a critique about the book at all, it's that the assholes in the book are nothing but like they are just no redeeming quality. They're just terrible. Like they're kind of just there to be terrible. And I don't even know if they named the one in the like the bully girl.
Well, they
That's-
say that they end up being friends later.
and her name's Christine.
But they don't give us any like.
Yeah.
She ends up being one of
Well,
my
and they
best
kind of
friends.
do the
but-
same thing to Joe, where they're
Yeah.
like, "We remember when we played cards, and it was nice, but like we never see those
Yeah,
people
we
being
don't get
anything
to see
but
Right.
their
dicks."
redemption.
Yeah.
There's no
So
kind
that
of return on investment.
when they're
yeah.
like when they are both characters put down in like kind of monologues, it's just like, well, yeah, they do suck. I mean, like they just don't seem like 3-dimensional characters, and they're not. Neither is really related to the plot of the story as a whole.
Yeah,
So
it kind of feels
just,
like tangential.
Yeah, like it feels like a need to say this thing that is maybe just like outside of the scope of what the story that's being told is. But
I'd agree with that for Joe, but for the bully at school,
because she steals the locket, so that's, that's
yeah,
important.
she steals the locket and then she locks
The-
Mia into the room, preventing her from saying goodbye to Grace.
I think the part with Joe, like, yeah, that conversation, I guess, yeah, it doesn't really have a, I don't know, yeah, meaningful part in the story. I think that character's introduction was important for, that sets up, I guess, what that our cast of characters kind of becomes, because that's the time when, what is the other character's name? Shar, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. Is away. She's been suspended. Mm-hmm. Joe's there to fill in. So, yeah, maybe that's a weird way for them to like have to band together against this person who's just kind of inserted there. But I guess the one thing I liked that came from that was, I guess it's earlier than that when Joe is being like, I guess I don't remember exactly what she's saying to them, but Mia says something to the like second in command, whose name I'm forgetting.
Is it Alma?
Alma.
Yeah.
And she basically says like, you have to do something about this, like, say something. Mm-hmm. And Alma, who previously has been the one keeping everyone in line. Yeah. She's the one who she likes to yell, so she does that role. All of a sudden, she's like, "Why? What am I supposed to do about it?" Yeah. Because her actual support is gone.
Right.
So yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe to your point, that specific conversation with Joe is kind of just like crammed in there
it's
in
just
an
the only
awkward
part
way.
where the book is more tell than show.
Yeah.
Where like there's and that's why I guess I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is like when we are introduced to Joe, it's just kind of like in medias res, mm-hmm. and like I spent all of those pages being like, yeah, well we hate her because she's not Char, like that's why we don't like her,
right?
Because that's what it seems like's happening, and then
right.
they're like, no, we don't like you because you use the wrong pronoun for Ellie, and it's just like,
right.
Okay, that makes sense, but that didn't seem to be what the problem was, or like
mm-hmm.
it does, like they do comment on it like earlier on because she does misgender Elle like kind of right away, and someone, I don't know, it just rang as like a weird moment in a book that is like really good at artfully doing.
Yeah, I guess thinking about it more though now, they do kind of say like, I think she was trying to use that as an example because she says like, and because you don't, this, she sort of says like, this is an example of you not respecting other people's just like wishes or whatever.
And I think that would have rang true if we had seen her do that in any
some other
way.
time,
right? Where it was just like that, like where we could be like, this is Joe has a bad value structure, or it's just it's like that self-centered.
But we just kind of see it, those two times.
Yeah, and it's just it's the same thing both times.
Yeah.
But
makes sense.
Well, we've talked. I think probably that's like one of my two things that was in.
So this is a collection of webcomics.
Yeah.
That was compiled,
mm-hmm.
and I'm sure some extra pages were added to kind of make this big book. So I wonder, like, to me, this book is a little disjointed as far as the storytelling goes. I'm like, the plot is, I didn't get to say goodbye to my girlfriend, and I'm never going to, but I have a ride now, so I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine because
the original title for the book.
Yeah, it was long. It didn't fit on the cover.
Yeah.
And that's fine because that's not what this book is. The book is about telling you a story through art, making you feel feelings through art, which it does very, very well. But if you're reading it like from front to back, it does come off as disjointed because it almost seems like there are points where she's like, I'm feeling upset about people who are misgendering people, so we're dropping Joe in specifically to do that because this is something I'm personally hurting over right now.
Right.
So
yeah, maybe.
I feel like that kind of when I read the closing of the book where she talks about how this was, you know, a webcomic series and they compiled the book out of it, it kind of made some of those make a little more sense, you know, where things didn't necessarily line up, because it doesn't feel like there was a plan from the beginning. It feels like a bunch of random thoughts.
It
and
feels like an
feelings.
experiment almost,
Yeah.
like taking kind of a nugget of an idea and I do feel a little jealous of the people that got to experience it that way the first time.
Yeah.
I do agree with the idea that it's not the best. Like, it's not a good. Like, I wouldn't say take this on like an airplane with you. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain books you could have. Like,
well,
you
like
could read
this is
Black
the
Hole.
opposite of Vision, right? So like we look at Vision and everything is structured from the start and it has a point in the end, and that isn't really what's here. This is like a feeling. This is a ride. You know.
This is, I think, a really good book where you could sit down and you could maybe just cruise a few chapters at a time. And I think it's a really, really great way to digest a story like this too, because it lets you kind of, like Christine said earlier, it gives you the opportunity to like slow down and kind of take every part of the story in. Because, I mean, even though it's not super dialogue heavy, like there's moments where there is a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a really good way to experience a story like this.
And we'll jump to the end really quick. They just drop a bunch of weird sci-fi stuff on us at the end.
There's
why didn't we
lot.
get more of those magical foxes?
Yeah.
And, you know,
and like what, you know,
I
it
liked
just
it.
seemed like suddenly there was just all this stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't feel like, again, I feel like I wasn't looking at it through the lens of sci-fi, so it all just felt like, if you look at it all like dream logic, I feel like it's kind of okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I didn't
And-
have a
and
problem with it,
it's-
but it was
it's
just,
mystical vibe to it for sure.
It's not like it's jarring when you get to it, but when you reflect on, like, wait, that's kind of weird. Where did all that stuff?
Yeah.
Like, so, for a book that wasn't action based, for it just to have like the ending chapters be so action focused, I thought was kind of strange.
This
Well,
is... Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say before Elliot finished the book, but was partway through, Elliot did, and I had finished the book. Elliot was like, "Is there ever a conflict?" Like, he hadn't gotten that
I was
far
like
in
a third
it.
of the way through the
Yeah,
book.
and I was like, "Don't worry,
That's-
it's coming. It's like halfway through."
Yeah.
Well, that to
where it shifts.
To Ryan's point, like
Yeah.
that's, I cannot imagine what reading this like a webcomic would have been like, because I don't know what increments this was doled out in.
Yeah.
It wasn't readily
Sure.
apparent to me,
yeah.
and I don't know that I could have stuck with this if they were what the distance in time between the early third of this book,
Yeah.
like how that
Sure.
was
Yeah.
released. Because it is a long time before something happens that makes a character make a decision.
Yeah, there's
About anything.
there's a
That's
lot of
true,
people
yeah.
who aren't sure exactly of what they're doing.
And I get it, because it's like we're flashing back and forth between high school and new job, which are like two places where no one has any agency.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think the where it starts in the like present day timeline, from that to her school, in both of those scenarios, she's the new person, or it's it's an unfamiliar setting. But I guess one thing that impressed me about this book is when it starts, it really feels like you have the main character and then you have this tight group. And it is just us and this main character trying to learn about them as a cohesive group, because they're already on the job together and they all seem, super tight. But as it progressed, there were just like you just got so many little things about these character relationships that when they layered on top of each other, I thought the characters just felt so well realized, because they didn't have, like, when we first meet them, there's not big, like, sort of stereotypical or archetypal things to put these characters in. They're just kind of like, no, it's just like these four people or whatever doing this job. One of them's the boss. But the one who's the boss isn't actually the boss. Exactly.
Right.
And
that was
then
fun. I like that.
like the more it just like slowly unraveled little bits of all these characters and how they're connected. I mean, there's so many, like, there's the boss and the second in the command are in a relationship. There's one of them is the aunt of another. Like they all just have. There are so many just little tiny things they have between one another that I thought made their whole dynamic.
Yes, it's
so
makeshift
awesome.
family.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of fluidity, I also again kind of goes to my like, this is like borderline. Like I don't know, this is gonna sound so like up my own ass to say it, but like Salman Rushdie, like just like fluidity between characters and just like. Again, that kind of like dream logic, like the characters represent so many different things to. I mean, if we have a focal point character, which it seems like we do through most of the book, and then that kind of changes at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I guess it's like we know it's this like. Maybe it's just from the back of the book or whatever, we know it's like this love story for that main character, right?
Yeah.
But then I think as it progresses, we're like, oh no, it's everyone in some way or another is searching for something or finding their connection or...
The pacing therein works. But it is real, like, non-traditional and like that... Because it does seem like this is a book about one person for a very long time. And then, like, the back eighth of the book is like everybody splits up and goes and does their own thing.
Right,
Well, and they have to give us a reason to go to this super serious, a deadly place that you're not allowed to go to just because Mia wants to say goodbye. Like, I mean, obviously we want to help our friends to do things like that, but that's a pretty big ask there.
Yeah.
So there's this poisonous fox cat.
Yeah.
You're gonna choke
It's
on weird
it's
bits
illegal to be
and
there.
potentially turn into a
And
vegetable.
a
It's not
member of
tight.
our crew actually is banned from being there
Yeah.
and will be harmed.
Just killed on sight by an angry mob, I guess.
It's not tight.
Yeah.
Not a tight situation you want to walk into.
Yeah.
But can we figure out what D&D game they're playing and just start playing that? Because that
really
looks
good.
incredible.
I mean, I think one time they refer to it as video games, so who knows what it is.
I love their like puffer fish looking space.
Oh,
Yeah.
So much. I like how the future scenes or the present day scenes feel so empty, and the past scenes feel so crowded. Which is like a really interesting thing for jumping back and forth between adulthood and childhood, is because everything seems big and like you ever go to like swings and things that are like an arcade as an adult going out in as a child and just
All
being
the
like,
time.
oh, it seems empty and small.
It's so
now.
rinky dink when you're tall.
Yeah, but like when you're a kid, like it has this whole book has that feeling of like.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't pick up on it until you said that.
It's just like there's no other people except for the main characters in
Sure.
any of the future scenes, and then in all of the past scenes there are just kids.
Yeah,
like,
right. Yeah,
everywhere,
there's
crowds.
always a setting where there's tons of people around.
Other thing I didn't like about the book, because I'm that guy. Did anybody else have trouble with the lettering?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
There were a couple
I
times.
also had trouble with they would do color shifts on the characters from like out of nowhere.
And a couple of them,
And I was
I was like,
who is
who
similar
is
enough
this?
from certain
Yes.
angles
Yeah.
that
That was that's a
when
definite
Em
one.
gets her haircut was the part where I
It
was
was
just
like
fuck, now there's 3 people with the same haircut. Like,
It was a real like Charlie Adler Walking Dead sort of situation where like at the height of that book, with as many characters as it carries, there is a point where like certain situations, because it's a black and white book, you're like, wait, who? Who? You're not? Is that Rick? Okay. Oh, you have to like flip 4 pages back and like retrace your
back the
story
steps,
steps sometimes.
there's a real good J. Michael Straczynski comic called Rising Stars that was drawn by Gary Frank.
Oh wow.
Originally, but Gary Frank couldn't keep up with it, and so they switch artists, and Gary Frank is good enough to draw 3 guys with long black hair and make them recognizable as different characters.
Sure.
And the guy who picked up after was not.
Oh,
and
no.
So it was just like unintelligible.
So it was a real
afterwards.
Matrix
It
3
was like,
situation.
I have no effing idea who's saying what or why is this guy in this bar? I thought he was in. It's the end of this book. There are moments of that where I was a little, and it's not because the art's bad, but it's stylized in such a way. Also on the color, though, one more thing I just want to say on the color. It does my favorite thing when a colorist does something that's not... And I know this is all one person doing all of this, so that's, like, infinitely more impressive. But, like, when you see color do a thing that isn't in the pencils, like light coming through Venetian blinds and, like, leaving streaks of color on an object, and that's not drawn there. You know?
Right, yeah. Yeah, stuff like that really, like, little flourishes like that add so much to a book that has a really, like, minimal style for the most part. So those little flourishes like that go a really long way, too, to flesh things out.
How awesome is their job, though?
Yeah.
Like, they fly through space, and they
kinda
restore
like,
these old...
Yeah, they mostly restore. I think there's one they
or
don't,
they
right?
just
Isn't there one they have
demolish?
to, like, destroy or
I
something
think so.
like that?
I think it just kind of
Yeah,
depends
there's one
on...
that Mia destroys, definitely.
Yeah.
True.
And that's where I think we're going to see more conflict and like something drastic is going to happen, and she just kind of gets reassigned to work with somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then Char gets in trouble.
yeah, that's
but-
kind of the drastic thing. But I think at that time in the book, that's where we're seeing the conflict begin in the school scenes. I don't remember if it's when or maybe that's when she is getting in trouble for stealing one of the little ships for their sport.
The
Lux.
all
Where they
childhood fantasy sports are fly around
fly
and collect a
around.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
What else could you want to do?
I mean, I don't know. Every other sport on the planet is tennis, but
Right.
Fantasyland, it's always.
It's
gotta be a team
It's the
sport,
magic
you gotta-
carpet level from Aladdin on
Yeah.
Genesis.
Elliot, you mentioned the ship being the fish. I was watching a couple of interviews with Tillie Walden from I think it was like from Small Press Expo, and she talks about, she's like, oh, she's like, I didn't really know how to draw ships, or like, she's like, but I know how to draw fish. She's like, so I just made it work. And I was like, I love that.
That's like
That's
consistent
awesome.
from that feels like so it's. I'm glad you do this research so that I don't have to. But that like makes a lot of this book make sense to me.
Yeah.
And kind of one of the things I loved about it is like, well, at first it's jarring because I'm so used to reading, like I read a lot of science fiction, like
Sure.
comics and otherwise.
Yeah.
And even some really good science fiction is written by writers who just want to show you the shit they know about stuff.
Yeah.
And that is like super present in some of my favorite comic book writers, where like,
Yeah.
like I feel like I learned a thing. 'Cause
Yeah,
now I
there's-
know how this works.
Sometimes Grant Morrison just wants to flex a
Yeah,
knowledge
because
bubble.
Grant Morrison told me that's how this works. And like that's, I mean, Adrian Chudovsky, like any of my like favorite contemporary science fiction writers, we're okay over here.
It's just a map.
That's kind of like a thing. This, like, okay, I know how to draw a spaceship, so I drew fish.
Yeah.
because-
She was like, I'll just make it work.
'cause let's
And I was
go
like,
with it.
I really admire that.
That is like everything in this book, where it's
Yeah.
this interpersonal story, and it's just like, I don't know how like space, like
How would space
community,
excavation?
Right, yeah, how does
housing
space
would
architecture work out?
So I
Not
just
gonna
show
worry
him
about
carrying
that.
like a bobble or something like
Yeah.
that. and
Right.
we're good.
There will still be statues that
Yeah.
they to deal with.
Like I
so-
need it to be like what would be a part of space that you couldn't get to because it would be dangerous. Who cares? Like
Yeah.
it's
Right,
just
yeah, we'll
lots
figure
of
it
just
out.
like we don't need to explain what it is. 'Cause
Sure.
we're just explaining the situation that, again, back to it kind of being natural reason. Like you understand what having a new boss that you don't like because your old boss was your friend is
Right.
like, and we understand what like being in a dangerous place is,
Yeah.
and we understand what school like. We don't. They don't learn anything about anything. That like it.
Sure, yeah, it's all
They
like
take some tests.
right,
On
yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Like it's very Tillie Walden is very economical with like what background information about the world is given to us. We're
Yeah.
only told something if we need to know it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
The end.
the test question: what was the first planet to have artificial stars? Starts with E.
Second letter's at A.
Yeah, that's right. Earth.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Moving on.
But I don't know, I thought that-
test that someone was ill
I
prepared
thought
to
that
take.
was an interesting tidbit of just like this little like artificial stars. Now I want to think about that.
That
That's
is
just
really neat,
another
though.
like
true.
kind of. I felt like there were little off roads where I'd stop
Sure.
and think about something or like
Yeah.
imagine it through or think about okay, how does this work? Like,
I had such the opposite reaction to it.
why don't you want to talk about it?
No, I mean that's kind of
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like for me it was like stay focused. Like you don't need to think about
Yeah, I get
this
both
universe,
avenues of it too.
like other than what we're giving you.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but
there's like one robot in one panel, and that's the only time we see a robot.
Yeah, I
And
guess.
now I'm like, Give me some more
starting to feel like
robots.
the Rocky IV director's cut. They're just taking the robot out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I enjoyed it for what I
Yeah.
enjoyed said
Yeah.
robot for what it was, but it was
Because it's kind of like, oh, there's robots, and then you move on.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like another thing that's just an accepted, implied
Yeah.
facet of the world, and I think that's
Yeah.
a good point too. Like both sides of it are super valid.
I
and
think
interesting.
it's interesting that it can be both things.
Yes,
I mean,
that's like another testament, I think, to her writing. Like that you can kind of look at it either way, and it works both ways. Like neither one is wrong. You know what I mean? Like it works perfectly both ways.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like that robot on that page is like when you go see like a stage production of A Christmas Carol, and there's like a couple that like skips by and then kisses in the background and then wanders off the screen, and you're
Like
like,
a
you
kid
know
on
that they're just
crutches or
gonna
something.
circle around, get a quick costume change, and be back as like two other people.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Ticket
but this time
takers.
it's a robot.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like I mean, like I don't. There wasn't like a, I wonder what that robot story is. It was just like that looks rad.
Yeah.
Moving on, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes with the whole thing we were talking about earlier of like it felt the world felt somewhat real. It felt, and that you get to know the characters incrementally. It did feel like you're just dropped in this world, and this world exists, and we are expected to accept how it is.
Yeah.
And
It's all like context clues.
the way we met each person, it was kind of mirroring the way you actually meet people in real life. Like
Yeah.
I have all these new coworkers, I know nothing about them, and then over time, you know, you get little tidbits. Even though we're all working, we're at work for another purpose, you still tend to get little pieces and parts of what their
Sure.
background and relationships are and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there is that, but I think so I get where you're coming from. It's like, yep, I am here and I accept that. Yes, there is a robot, but there is a story to be told, and I'm relating to these characters. But I also, definitely had some moments of wondering, and maybe this is the logical part of my brain, but I'm like, wait, how do they reproduce? Or,
you start thinking about the wider question, the larger questions of the universe.
Yeah, it stops just like one step short of that for me, where there's like there needed to be someone saying like, remember the great robot uprising of
Yeah.
But it never does that, so I never feel like I'm taken out of like the moment. I don't
you
know,
never have to be concerned with it.
There's an immediacy to the book for me that I really liked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of other good questions to ask you guys about it.
Well, another thing I know I learned
recommended
in
this
that.
to Sarah, which is something I don't do very often.
Oh.
I'm like, I think you should read this book. It's
Nice.
very good.
Because there's
Nice.
not a lot of words and it's just mostly.
And she can't
picture.
read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
In that interview I watched, she also mentions too that she's apparently never really been a big Western comics fan. She's very much gravitated
Ryan,
towards
Ryan gets heart palpitations when someone
Anime.
asks him what-
Western
started
comics.
gravitated more towards like anime and manga and stuff. She's a huge Studio Ghibli fan and stuff like that.
that's-
And
Oh,
that,
I think I
that
saw-
explains a lot on a lot of
Yeah.
levels for this book, in terms of like the relationships and the storytelling and the, especially the pacing.
Yeah.
When she said she's a huge manga fan, I was like, okay, that explains like the size, the layouts, the pacing, and everything. I mean, short of reading right to left, it feels like you're reading a manga.
Oh, you didn't read this right to left?
No, well, I started, and then nothing
That's
made
how
sense.
you find out where the robot's from.
Yeah, that's how I found out about the robots,
You
and I
read it
figured I was
backwards.
probably a little bit too
Yeah.
late. So I
how the
turned the
robots
book
work.
around and read left to right, old school style. So.
Dave Gibson says this ship gives me some Ponyo vibes. I would agree.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Looks like a little Ponyo.
It totally does. Yeah.
I think I saw one of the characters somewhere had a Moomin doll or something. It
Oh,
looked
really?
Like yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's not
A little
not,
Easter egg.
not manga, but it's
Right.
non-American comics. So I don't know.
Would have been cool to see a little Totoro
Little
doll
Totoro.
hiding in
There
here
might be
somewhere.
one in there.
This is just a really sweet book.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's I maybe pulled a couple tears at the end there. It was just really heartwarming.
There were a
and
couple-
really special.
Forget where it was too. This book definitely made me laugh a couple times.
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. I forget.
It's
what
when
parts,
it
but-
uses its
yeah.
wit, it uses it
Yeah.
really
I think-
precisely and
when-
and just it just works really well.
When Elle rocked him at that game, like pulls out the win at the end, and they have that little smirk on their face. I was cracking up. Like I just
the beauty of this book is, I think, in the little moments for me too. Like just those, like in every way. Like Elliot said, just those little flashes of color, or like Christine, like the little bits of like the test at school, or like just little jabs at each other, like just stuff that makes it feel like, reminds you of your friends, of just like giving each other a hard time, and like roasting each other, and like and just laughing, and this book feels so much like that to me. And especially coming out of what we were in the midst of attempting to come out of, and people are going back out into the world, and we're seeing our friends again. It feels like a very timely read in that way too. Like it's like a primer to like be social again, or like attempt to be social again.
So the way the ship looks when it's landed, it looks like it's sleeping.
Like
it just looks like a tired fish,
like,
man.
Just sleeping fish.
Like
Yeah.
it's smiling and open eyes as it's flying through space.
So that was another like little offshoot that I took of like, are the ships
Are they
like
alive?
mechanical,
Are they living?
or
Yeah, are they
like are they
biological,
biomechanical?
or-
Like what are they?
Do they make that funny Hanna-Barbera bubble noise when they fly? Does it just go like?
Yeah.
The Jetsons car.
Yeah, it just sounds like.
I will say, as someone who is like a sucker for fantastical or like surrealist landscape stuff, every full page,
Yes.
you can see it. That
Oh,
is like
mhm.
this.
Yes.
Framed
There was so
and
much
hung on my
good
wall.
stuff.
Like
I
all
Fresh.
support this.
Yeah.
I would just
Potentially in black velvet.
some gold gilded frames.
Yeah.
Like
Ooh.
I mentioned earlier that I would read this book if it just didn't have dialogue. I would just, if she just put out a book this size and it was just single page
Yeah.
of just this
Kinda
is
like
this is a temple, this is a mountain, this is a
Sandman
forest.
Dream Hunters
Yeah,
prose
I would
stuff
just
along with it.
I would just pour over that over and over again, because her work is just gorgeous.
Speaking of talking, what did you think when Elle finally talked?
I mean, it's real tough. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I actually
Anytime somebody lights a cigarette and speaks for the first
Starts
time
speaking.
after 300
Yeah.
pages, is
Big Vinnie Jones
was-
at the end of Gone in 60 Seconds vibes.
it was awesome, but I also really liked. I guess, even more surprised that happened, because just like a chapter before, Elle whispers something that we don't get to see, which I really
Well,
thought was cool.
I guess I was under the impersonation, God. The impression that Elle does talk, just not a lot or in crowd or in group.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
like there's a scene with M where it's like she's saying stuff to Elle, being like, "Oh, and I read that book you told me about," or whatever, pretty early on. Where
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well.
Well, I guess I just thought. I mean, there are other scenes where we see Elle with like a notebook, like
yeah, you're
communicating
right. I
to
totally
people.
forgot
So
about that. Yeah.
But then Elle just talks.
Then
and
just
talks
lights
and
up a cigarette and
like
talks
it's
in
like
front
the
of this-
dam breaks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
well, and I guess they were with someone from this like previous life
Yeah, yeah.
almost.
Yeah,
so
like
maybe
their aunt or
something like
yeah.
that.
I mean, but that-
and also, I guess they weren't talking when they all got back on the ship to leave. It's not like she
Yeah.
was still talking to everyone. So
I guess I didn't see it. You're
It's
right.
like-
Now it makes sense that like maybe she had like no one had heard her speak
only
prior
at
to
that part, yeah.
I thought it was kind of so like keep in mind I read it as like, oh, she was talking but she just doesn't like they
Not
are not
much.
assertive in groups. When M is having that conversation with her.
Yeah.
Or with them. Sorry, God, now I'm doing it. But when like, have you ever like had a friend that you hung out with a lot and you thought you knew? I'm sure there's like probably someone has like a stand-up bit about this or something, but like where you hang out with them and then you meet their old friends or another friend group and they like magically transform into another person.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, not even like, oh, they've been putting on airs with you, but they
Yeah,
were
it's
just a different person in
vibe.
this different
Yeah.
life, and they slip into it relatively easily. Like I know I do that
Yeah.
sometimes.
It's my favorite Carlos Mencia bit right here.
Is it?
No.
Well, then,
Who was it by
well, I get the
originally?
joke
Would've been,
because
yeah.
jokes. Yeah,
You said it was a joke. You said-
But
Sorry.
someone
I
someone
just-
like but
yeah.
But it's like
That's-
it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Like where you're like, oh, you're out of your shell in a way I don't see you.
Yeah.
Because you're around
Just
people
different
that
group.
you're not even necessarily more comfortable, different comfortable.
Mhm. Right.
And that's kind of how I read it. But
As far as L speaking,
yeah,
I gotcha.
Where it was
Right.
just like, okay, this is like an element that
Yeah.
they operate differently in.
Right.
I like towards the end there, when Mia finally meets back up with Grace, and Grace they have that really gut wrenching moment where like you don't think Grace is gonna go, and then a couple pages later she shows up and I talked about it and I'm gonna do this, and you get that sort of like left turn of like the ship starts crashing and you're like, come on.
Yeah.
Like out loud I got to that page and I went, seriously? I was like, this is not cool.
Yeah.
Because like I'm
Yeah.
so invested in everyone,
Yeah.
and like everything is finally like everybody's kind of getting what they deserve and like should have, and then it just becomes kind of like this moment of like, all right, Grace, let's go. Like
Yeah.
here's what you're gonna do. Like she
They have
sets
to
the
have their
course.
little
Like
text, yeah.
yeah, and everything writes, and you kind of go like, whew. And like everything ends up being all right, but that's a real like
Yeah.
jerk of the steering
Yeah.
wheel, literally and figuratively.
I had two little things on when Mia finally meets Grace again.
Yeah.
That I thought were really awesome. I mean, just first of all, her conversation was like, I guess what could have been either cheesy or cringy. I know we went out when we were
Sure.
14. Please come back to like I thought their conversation was awesome of just being like, I just wanted to make sure you're
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted that was great, I thought. And then when Grace does decide to come back or leave with all of them,
Yeah.
I love that one of her sisters was there like helping her, so that
Yeah.
it wasn't this just like, and I'm running away from my
Yeah,
family.
it
You've
was-
saved me from them.
Yeah.
It was like, no,
We
Yeah.
talked.
We-
It was this like
they
family
do
decision.
This
interesting
was-
family mechanics with Grace.
Yeah.
From the beginning, where although did anybody else feel like it was necessary to have so many sisters? Like I didn't get a sense of her sisters as people because I feel like there were too many of them.
Yeah, I don't really know why. I guess.
I don't know.
I guess other than it wasn't all really fleshed out. I guess when
Because there's three, right?
there are
Yeah,
three,
three
and like
older sisters.
we see tidbits of them having little dynamics
But
differently,
not enough of it.
but not
for them.
enough.
Like, I kind of want
because-
to know why that decision was made.
Yeah,
It's
because
not
like
so
when they
bad.
when they go to the school to get her, there is like one of them that is clearly like it's her girlfriend, guys.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah,
like, be
there's the
cool
one who
about it,
clearly
you
has
know.
the, like established relationship.
Yeah,
with
there's,
there's
like,
like
her,
the level-headed
knows her
sister,
best.
Yeah,
the protective sister, the
But yeah, we
it's
didn't
just
get
like-
enough of it to.
Yeah, it seems like it's maybe one of the few things in this, like, again, very economical book that is
Yeah.
like maybe.
For
more
me, I
less
think it
undefined.
just drove home how important family is for her, and the fact that like all three of them were there meant it really had to have been. It couldn't have just been like some minor issue at the house. You got to come home. Like the fact that all three were like, stuff's really bad, and like you better go before we can't bring you back ever. And I think
Yeah.
it was just more of like in service to that element than anything else too. Because you don't learn too much, but you get like glimpses of what the dynamics are with the different sisters, but you don't find out who they are.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a plan. I
Yeah.
think things were just kind of, well, I'll do three sisters because maybe I'll have a need for a
Yeah.
third sister later. Like, I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah, just it felt in service to just that family element. To
It's a
me.
rule of threes.
Yeah.
And that too. I mean, storytelling rule of three makes sense.
Chekhov's fish spaceship.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Did anyone else, after reading this, has anyone else, oh, here we go, from the chat, Dave Gibson. Mia missing the chance to say goodbye to Grace because she was being bullied was brutal.
Yes.
It felt like a very genuine display of what it was like to not have control when kids are being cruel. Yeah, that was
Hard
that was
agreed.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That stuff was
And
tough.
like it was jarring too because there was nothing like like that up until that point. Like, I mean, there was some bullying and stuff, but it's like that is like crazy TV bullying, like
locking you in the room.
I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but like that isn't something that happens to people that I've met in my life where they're just like, oh, I'm locking you in this weird, I don't know, tomb thing overnight. Like, and the fact that that's not one of the first things she says to Grace is also very strange to me. Like, I wanted to make sure you were okay. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. I was locked in this thing all night.
Yeah.
But at that point, it doesn't matter. Grace is what matters.
I will.
Right.
I also say one of the things I think is really well done, for writing kids in here is like when we are introduced to Grace, she is like a total eccentric.
Sure.
And they totally make good on why she's an eccentric.
Yeah.
Like it feels understandable and reasonable the more we learn about Grace.
Yeah.
Where I thought it was just going to be like quirky high school kids going to be quirky high school kids, which is like a thing that happens a lot when people write kids, where they're like, the weird kid is the weird kid.
Yeah, you go by the
reasons.
Breakfast Club models.
Yeah, and this is like, no, they're like this weird secluded society. They, their knowledge of like what kids are like is based on recommendations from Grace's sisters, who also don't know any people outside of their weird close.
Sure.
And on top of that, they're like the head of the power structure there, right?
Yeah. So like, that's a hard thing to do. Writing adults writing children is difficult.
For sure.
When it's done well, it's kind of hard not to just be like, that must.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
Any final thoughts?
One, I guess, has anyone read any other Tillie Walden?
I haven't, but this makes me want to pick up
I
other
want to
stuff.
go out and look for more
I
stuff.
know
She has a book called Spin. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Mention that one.
She has a book called Spinning, which I think is, if not biographical, it's like semi-biographical.
Yeah. I believe so.
But I think she was like heavily into like dance and ballet and ice skating and things. So I think it goes a lot into that sort of stuff. I don't know how personal it gets or anything, but she's also got a few other books.
And she has an upcoming one, comes out in July. Now, of course, I forget the name, but I believe it is a collection of short stories.
Oh, that's interesting, too.
So maybe those are, I don't know if those are also things that have been webcomics or
been
not.
out? Is it First Second again?
I do not remember.
First Second, doing some real awesome stuff.
They're doing a lot of stuff.
Tillie
lately,
Walden is
like.
also going to be writing and doing one of the covers for the Skybound X issue
awesome.
one.
Does
Oh,
everybody
really?
know what that is?
Yeah.
I haven't heard much about that, no.
It's an anthology of all Kirkman's properties. There'll be some new Walking Dead, some new Invincible.
Oh, wow.
Some new
Yeah, I think Ultra
everything.
Mega will be
New
there.
Ultra, so it's kind of an anthology comic.
Yeah.
It seems like
A
that.
bunch of different creators get to, I guess, reimagine or make new stories with some of these.
It is. It
some of these
seems
stories.
rad in that difficult to convey sort of way that sometimes comics are.
It's almost like a jam book, it sounds like.
Yeah,
yes,
that's actually
exactly.
But yeah, the like, it's interesting because I think that first issue, it's like Tillie Walden and like Donnie Cates. It's
it's
What
like
a
a
great
real
juxtaposition
okay.
that is.
Sure.
One guy writes a comic about hillbilly vampires, and the other one does heady space family love
stories.
drama
Yeah.
sci-fi.
We can
stories.
talk about it offline, but did anybody else see the Cates announcement? What he's written now?
I did. Nick and I were talking about it before you got here.
It's weird.
It's very weird.
I love that these first second books have this flow chart in the back. That's
Yeah,
that's
I like
really neat.
like I want to steal this idea and just make one for.
if you like this,
Yeah, it goes very
Mine is
like,
just gonna
if
have
you like this
J. Michael
genre, check
Straczynski in
these
the middle
out.
of it, and
and it all ends on the same book.
yeah.
One other quick thing I had on Tillie Walden. This made me because I again think her, and it seems like we were in general agreement on like she just did the team dynamic here like so well. I thought like I want to see her write like a superhero team.
I
like
thought the same thing.
there was
like,
so
I'd
much
be so
like
curious to see
good
what she does.
stuff just from that group of these 5 people or whatever. Like
Yeah,
I don't know.
totally.
Write,
I mean, like,
write me a superhero team.
I made it
That'd
in
be
kind of
awesome.
like a negative way the first time I said, but like, I'm no joke. It reminded me of like Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, it was.
I would love to see her on like a Champions, like
Yeah,
team
that would be-
Just
superhero
that
any
would be
five.
good.
Just grab 5 that you want to use that
Yeah.
you can write a story about, make them a team.
Yeah, Young Avengers, whatever. Some
Yeah.
Avengers property, right? They're clearly going to
That'd
do
be a
Young
good
Avengers
fit.
in the MCU, so
Yeah.
Marvel called Tillie Walden, get
There
her
you
on
go.
the phone for a Young Avengers book.
It's a good thing they watch us.
Yeah.
That's right.
So now they know.
Yeah, I mean, well, Cebulski sees these. He doesn't tell people he watches them, but he watches them. He's texted me and told me that before. It is what it is.
Nice.
I'm really glad I read this book.
Me too.
Yeah, me
Like,
too.
I'm really glad.
This
I
was
read
a
this
really
book.
great pick.
I'm gonna go get the
Good
next
pick.
book.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
about doing that too, but I didn't want to just get up and walk off camera unexpectedly.
Look. Yeah.
Yeah.
So remember.
But
This
yeah,
is-
speaking of Marvel, because I was
Oh.
we were texting our shop friend CB Cebulski with the in our group chat, and he was like, "Hey guys, and next book club, like it would be cool to do some Marvel again." He's like, 4th of July, Captain America is kind of a big deal.
Big deal.
People
Yeah, we
really
are.
seem to like him. This Ta-Nehisi Coates guy seems to really be a popular writer. I don't know too much about him. New talent on the scene, it seems.
He
This,
just flamed
This
them
is
pretty hard,
this is
so.
the most superscript possible pick. I feel like for like, well, it's the 4th of July, and we should. It's July.
Captain
we should
America.
do a
Why
Captain
not?
America book, and
Yeah.
let's do the Ta-Nehisi Coates game.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, it was. Let's be honest. It was between this and Secret Empire.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, we were going to upset somebody.
This book should upset no one. This
I
is,
agree completely.
Yeah, like if this book upsets you in some way, that's
Let's have a conversation.
yeah, or not. Let's have a conversation about this book. Ta-Nehisi Coates, MacArthur Genius Grant winner, Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Writing Captain America.
If you only read books with pictures in them, you should look up the things that Ta-Nehisi Coates has written that don't have pictures in them, because it was, for me, it was a huge honkin' deal when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a comic.
Right.
As someone who had followed his work prior,
It would be like Mark Twain coming back and writing
yeah,
Deadpool.
like
Like-
it is like, I mean,
I'm gonna write
Nice.
Deadpool. I don't know if that really sounds like.
It's
but-
perfect.
pretty
Dead
good.
on.
It is like in line, which is interesting because Ta-Nehisi Coates and Michael Chabon are friends in real life. But like when Michael Chabon wrote a comic and then wrote
Yeah.
Star Trek, and I was just like, what is like those moments of vindication where you realize the people who are into like high art
Uh-huh.
are actually into the same stuff we're into, and you're like, okay, like.
You're like, we're bros.
Well, and just that I'm not crazy for finding deeper
Sure.
meaning in all of these stories about superheroes and spaceships and all that shit. When
It's
you're like,
validating.
yeah, like it is definitely when you're like, oh man, the guy who wrote October Sky grew up, watching Next Gen and reading
Right.
comics. But so anyway, like when Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing Black Panther, it made a lot of sense to me because it was like, I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates at that point I think was best well known for that essay about reparations and Between the World and Me, which were both about, are in different ways about Black identity in America, and just Black identity. And so writing Black Panther, the like lone, I mean not the lone, there's okay there, but the most recognizable Black superhero,
Especially
Sure.
at that
at
time.
that time.
And like that was a big deal alone.
Yeah,
Like,
and like, so I think I would say this. I've been hurt before when like when talented authors write comics
Sure.
for the first time, and it like turns out that they're not the same skill set or whatever. Ta-Nehisi Coates clearly likes comics and is good at writing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because that Black Panther one was great, and I have no idea the genesis of what I mean, like other than what I've read. Ta-Nehisi Coates writing Captain America is, but I mean. No one else can write the Captain America story that the guy who writes the case for reparations can. Like
Yeah.
We've talked about this just in a ton of conversations at the shop. It's like it's the equivalent of it'll be the day we see a woman write mainline Batman.
Yes.
Like it's that big of a deal
Mhm.
where it's like this is a perspective no one's done before, and like this is the only person who could do it, like this in comics. And I
Right.
think that's like worth celebrating on its own.
Yeah.
And it's a really challenging comic. And if I haven't sold you on it yet,
Who does the art on that?
who cares?
Are there?
No, I'm kidding. I say that because I honestly.
I think Daniel Acuna
is it-
jumps on.
Is
at
he
some
the? I was
point.
gonna say because it's not the same person all the way through.
And I remember seeing.
Oh,
It's
Lionel Francis Yu's on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what's up.
Yeah,
I like
Yu
Lineal
fan.
Yu. I'm a big fan.
I am very wishy-washy on him.
There's some stuff where he does. It depends on if he inks himself or if somebody else
Yeah.
inks him.
Yep.
Because like a lot of times his stuff gets very very muddy.
Yeah.
If it's like if there's too much black ink on things, it loses a lot. But,
Yeah.
like he's got such a cool like detail oriented style, and like everyone feels like a separate lived-in person. Like they don't have
Yeah.
and like you mentioned earlier, three guys with long black hair and they all look different. That's something that like Lineal Yu I think could pull off.
Can anybody? So this starts after like a big thing has happened in the Marvel universe.
Oh, this starts after the super serum gets sucked out of Steve Rogers, right?
This starts after Hydra takes over the United States.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
post Secret Empire,
yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
post
Yeah.
return to status quo of Secret Empire.
Yeah.
But Steve Rogers is an old man here, right?
No, Steve Rogers.
No, that
is very
was
much Captain
Remender's.
America.
Oh,
Remender's
okay.
run, I think. Before when Sam took over, he was an old man.
This is
Oh.
Captain America. So there's a before this book. So like I guess context. There is a. This is gonna sound like the most comic book thing. Describing it. There is a clone of Captain America who is a fascist.
Yes.
Who works for Hydra. I'm doing this all from memory. So
He was created by the Cosmic Cube.
Yeah, Kobik. During
sounds about
Pleasant
right.
A
Hill.
living embodiment of the Cosmic Cube
And-
as a small child, yeah.
And so Hydra takes over, land of the free, home of the brave, and real Captain America comes back, beats up fascist Captain America.
He's got a beard. It's awesome.
Takes down Hydra. It's great. But Steve Rogers is then faced with coming to grips with the fact that when Hydra took over the United States, there were maybe like more Americans than Steve Rogers would have thought who were
Yeah.
like okay with that. Who were like,
Yeah.
at least the trains run on time. And
Oh wow.
It's it was very much a parallel. I
yeah,
feel. Like,
Yeah.
perhaps some things that were
Yeah.
happening
Yeah,
are
it's-
happening.
Very, very socially relevant.
yeah.
And so this begins with a Captain America who still very much believes in like the dream, the
Right.
dream of America is more than a myth. It is a dream, which is a different thing than a myth. But has to realize that maybe not everyone was as committed to that dream as he thought or even wanted it, and that he is still his fellow men, like the people he fights on behalf of, are maybe believe and care or in some reprehensible shit.
Yeah.
So,
It'll be an interesting episode, that's for sure.
Yeah.
yeah,
July
It'll be a really
7th.
cool
We're gonna-
conversation.
we're gonna have some interesting talks about this. I think this is gonna be one of those, hard to not talk about politics when talking about this book.
Sure.
Which,
But I think at the core of it, it's a lot about right and wrong too. So,
yeah,
I mean,
and I mean, like again, it's not like this book is not a like America, like it is.
Yeah.
It is like aspirational in a lot
sure.
of ways.
It's like America should be
Yeah.
book. So,
Anybody else
not,
got any other
but you know what I mean.
pseudo fart sound? America.
I think
No,
that's a
not
good
really.
out.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Thank you, guys.
Hope you enjoyed the book as much as we did. We'd love to hear your thoughts when you come into the shop next time. Tell us about what you thought.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't do
Oh.
the contest. Did you take us off?
What
Mine.
contest?
Josh,
I don't have one this
we
month.
don't have a oh, sorry. We don't have a contest.
There was too many pages in this book. I
All
didn't have
right.
time to come
No
up with one.
contest.
So next contest will be bigger than and
Oh,
better
I
than
didn't-
ever.
If you can
But,
tell us what planet had the first artificial stars, because that was the test question, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We said
I
the
think
answer.
we already
We
said
said
the
the
answer.
answer.
right?
Yeah, but they may not have heard
Okay,
it.
what was the second
True.
one?
Yeah, that's right. Tell us the second one
Second.
and
Yeah, there you go.
Give us the most convincing answer for the second planet with artificial stars, and we'll give you a high five
wins.
Yep.
because we're vaccinated.
I
And we
was
can
going
do
to
that now.
suggest trying to make a fish fly, but I feel like
No, don't
you
do
just
that.
get a
Just-
bunch of
yeah.
Yeah, we don't need
like
PETA.
whipped at your
Yeah.
head.
That's a bad look for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, now we will say goodnight.
See you later.
Good night, guys.
Everybody.